Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to provide a quick introduction to Grease Pencil and Blender. This will be like a quick start video just to get you familiar with the interface and the drawing tool. In future videos, I'll go into more detail about things like drawing, inking, coloring, animation, and more in depth on a lot of the tools and how to accomplish certain tasks in Grease Pencil. This is just for people who haven't actually used Grease Pencil before. It is a little different of an experience than drawing in Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint or another program like that. So if you've never seen it before, the layout may be a little confusing or how to get started may be a little confusing. So I'm going to alleviate some of that with this video, and then I'll use it to build upon in future videos. So let's get started. So I currently have Blender 3.3.0 open, and I don't have any add-ons or anything changes. This is just a standard install, so we should be looking at the same thing. So the first thing I want to do is note that on the startup menu, you can see on the left of the window, we have a couple of new file options. So general is what you typically see when you look at Blender. That'll provide the viewport view with the default camera, cube, and light. For this video, we're going to use the 2D animation view. But I did want to make sure you know that you can use Grease Pencil objects in any view. Since we're drawing, this is just a view we're starting with. So let me click on that. Okay, so this looks like a blank canvas, but what I want to note is that you're actually in the viewport. You're just in the camera view. So if I click and hold my middle mouse button, you can see we came out of the camera view, and now I can drag and scroll around. So this is actually the 3D viewport. The only difference from the standard Blender viewport is this doesn't include the light, the cube. We have the camera, the view is automatically set to the camera, and we have this white environment. If we look to the top right, this is the outliner, which includes all the objects that are in our scene. Below that is the properties menu, which provides information on each object when we click on it, so we can make changes to that object. Now there's a couple of properties down here that are specific to the overall Blender file, not just a certain object. And one of those is the world properties. So if you look down on the left tab, you'll see there's a world properties icon. If you click on that, this is how we can change the color of our background. So currently it's set to white. If I click here and pull down, you can see I'm changing the color of my viewport. So if you don't want a white background when you draw, that's how you change that. To get back to our original view, we're going to hit 0 on the numpad, and this takes us back to camera view. Now this only works on the numpad. It won't work on the number of keys on your keyboard. If you don't want to use the keyboard shortcut, you can also go to the top where it says View, click that, and from the drop down, go to Viewport and select Camera. And before we go further, there is an add-on that I want to enable, which comes standard with Blender. So to enable an add-on, let's go up to Edit, click Preferences, and with the add-on menu selected, I want to click in the search bar and type in Grease. So we only have one option, Grease Pencil Tools. Let's click on that to enable it, and then close out of that, and that's all you have to do. So this add-on expands the capabilities of Grease Pencil a bit and provides some additional shortcut options. So we'll discuss those as we go. I just want to make sure we enabled that so that when we need it, it's available. So if you're new to the Blender interface, this main section is the viewport. Below that is the timeline, which you can use for animating. To the top right is the outliner, and to the bottom right is the properties menu. So to the left, you can see these are our tools for drawing in Grease Pencil. We won't cover many of these in this video. I'm mainly going to work with the drawing tool, but we do have your standard fill, erase, tint, cutter, eyedropper, and then shape tools. And we'll discuss those in future videos. So now I want to focus on the draw tool. So with that selected, you can see that turns blue when it's selected. If you look to the top, you'll see these are the properties that affect that tool. So those do change if you click on other tools. So if I click on the pencil icon at the top left, you'll see that opens up and I get some additional options, which includes airbrush, ink pen round, marker bold, marker chisel, F pen, F pencil, and F pencil soft. So for now, I want to click on the F pencil. To the right of that, you can see it says solid stroke. And what this is the material option that's being applied to that pencil. And what I mean by that is if I click on the drop down next to that, you can see we have 4 default options when we chose 2D animation. They create a solid stroke, square stroke, solid fill, and dot stroke. So if I click on solid stroke and then draw on the viewport, you can see it is what it says it is. It's just a solid stroke. So that stroke is based on the material properties that are set to that stroke. To demonstrate that, I'll click on the drop down and choose square stroke. You can see the stroke color is red. So when we draw with that, you can see it's red. And it's hard to tell, but it's actually made up of tiny squares. You can see it's kind of breaking up as we draw with it. So if I click on the drop down again and choose solid fill, this won't have a stroke. This is more you draw an object with it. So if I start drawing, you can see I start building a shape with that. So it's filling what I draw in rather than providing a single stroke. So I'll go ahead and click on dot strokes and draw with that. It is what it sounds like. The stroke is made up of a lot of dots. So we'll go over creating materials for your strokes later in this video. But if you need to change them up there, say you have several strokes you like choosing from while you're drawing or painting, you can change up there, or you can hit U on your keyboard, and that'll bring up a pop-up where you can choose the strokes from there. So I'll hit U and select solid stroke to go back to that material. Now, one thing you can't do with that pop-up that you can do from the drop-down is if I click on the drop-down and click solid stroke to highlight it, you can see there's a stroke color set. Now I can change my stroke color here on the fly, but I'll also show you later in the properties menu to the right how you can change it there as well. So this means you don't have to go into the properties menu to actually change the color of the stroke. If you have multiple strokes on your canvas and you change the color there, it changes all of those strokes. Now to the right of the stroke selection option, you will see two icons. One is the Blender material icon, which looks like a little ball. And next to that is two dots with some paint below them. That icon is color attribute. If I select color attribute instead of the material, I can change my color in that window, draw with it, then change the color again and draw with that new color. If you want to use that for sketching or something, that's fine, but the material option really provides you with much more versatility. Say I've drawn a character and all of the outlines are blue, and I've used the material option. If I want to go back and change all those strokes to red, all I have to do is change it in the material, and it'll change them all across the canvas. However, if I've used the color attribute option, you can't do that. So there is an additional amount of versatility with that. So that's just something to keep in mind. I will probably just use the material mode throughout this because I like the flexibility it provides. So next to that option is the radius, which is the size of your drawing tip. You can click into it and drag to change that, or you can actually click it and then type in a number. Another option is you can click F on the keyboard and drag your stylus up or down to increase the size, and then click onto the canvas and that'll change it for you that way. So next to the radius button is a pressure sensitivity icon. So you can turn on and off your pressure sensitivity with that option. And next to that is strength, which is really more opacity. So you can change your opacity that way. And same as the radius, you can click into it and drag left to right to change it, or you can click into it and type a number in. If you want to change the strength using the keyboard shortcut, you can click Shift F and then drag your stylus and then click back into the canvas to set it. So next to the strength menu, you also have a pressure sensitivity option there, so you can click that on and off. So next to that pressure sensitivity button, you have two options as to how the stroke ends, whether it's a rounded tip or a flat tip. I typically leave it as rounded. Now the next three options, advanced stroke and cursor, we're not going to go into these too much for this video. So to the right at the top, you can see I have stroke selected in the outliner. So if I go to the properties menu below that, you can see the properties I can change. Mainly we want to focus on the grease pencil properties. So with stroke selected in the outliner, I want to go down to the properties menu and you can see a similar icon, which is the green squiggly line. I want to click on that. Those will be the properties for the grease pencil object. So when you click on and you look, the first thing you see is layers. So these are like layers in Photoshop. So one grease pencil object can contain multiple layers. So with what I've been drawing on the viewport, you can see I have lines and fills. These were automatically created when I created the grease pencil new file under 2D animation. So the icons next to those layer names include mask, onion skin, visibility, and lock. And we may go over these as we use them, but right now I'll just leave them as is. Next to those icons, you can see a vertical row of icons. The first one is plus, so if we want to add a layer, we can just click the plus icon. If we want to delete a layer, we can click the minus icon. If we want to move layers up and down, there's up and down buttons. And below that is a monitor icon, which is to isolate. So if I click on my fills layer and then click isolate, you can see my lines layer disappears. Now the lock icon locks the layer that is not selected. So it is a little different than the lock icons next to the layer name. So below that, for each layer, you have blend options, which include regular, hard light, add, subtract, multiply, and divide. You can change the opacity of the layer here. Below that is a use lights option. Now what this does is if you have a light in the scene, which we currently don't, the light can affect grease pencil objects. This may be an option you want depending on what you're doing in your scene, but I don't typically use this. So I'm going to go ahead and click that off. If you're ever working on a material and the color of the viewport doesn't look like it does with the color you're picking, and you have a light in the scene, that may be causing the problem. So you may make sure use lights is off if it's looking odd. Okay, next is the mask option. We'll go into this in a later video. So under mask is transform, which moves your entire layer. So if I've got the lines layer selected and I left click and drag location, you can see I'm moving the entire layer. I'm going to click Ctrl Z to undo that. Now this transform option only affects a layer. If you want to transform the entire grease pencil object, the easiest way to do that is up here to the left, you can see the mode you're currently in, which is draw mode. If I left click on that drop down, I can change it to object mode. And now you can see everything's lit up yellow, which means the entire thing is selected. So I've hit G on my keyboard and mouse drag. You can see I'm moving the entire grease pencil object. Now this would be globally, this wouldn't just be per layer. So this would move the entire grease pencil object. While I'm in object mode, I can hit S, and that'll allow me to scale it down. I'm going to click Ctrl Z to undo that. Then we hit R, and that rotates it. I'm going to undo that. And I'll click this drop down to go back to draw mode. Now I did want to mention one quick way to get in and out of your modes instead of clicking up there is a keyboard shortcut Control Tab. If I hit Control Tab, you can see the pop-up shows my different modes. Now if you're working in grease pencil, you'll probably stay in the draw mode most of the time, but if you want to affect the entire grease pencil object like I just did, you can go to object mode. You can also go to sculpt mode. So if I click Control Tab, you can see sculpt mode's an option. I'll click it. So in sculpt mode, I have some tools that allow me to affect the vertices that make up grease pencil objects. So on the left, you can see I have some tool options. The first one is smooth. I'm going to click it. Then I want to drag over a stroke in the viewport, and you can see it smoothing that out. And I can go over it multiple times to smooth it even more. There's also one called grab. I'll click that. Left click and pull, and you see I can manipulate these strokes. And we'll go over these in another video as well, but I just want to show you there are other modes that you may use while working in grease pencil. So I'm going to hit Control Tab to bring that back up and choose draw mode. Now if we go back to the properties on the right, I'm going to close out of transform. So I'm not going to address the rest of these in this video, but I do want to click on the Materials tab beneath the Grease Pencil Properties tab. And this is where the strokes are affected. So like I said, when you draw, you're actually drawing with a material. And you can see to the top right, we have the same strokes I showed you at the top left of the viewport, which is solid stroke, square stroke, solid fill, and dot stroke. So much like the options in the grease pencil menu, we can use onion skinning, we can turn on and off visibility, we can lock a layer, we can add a new stroke option, we can delete one, we can change the order, we can affect visibility and lock layers. So you can see in the properties at the bottom, when I click one of these strokes, the options change. So instead of affecting one of these strokes, I'm going to click the plus icon to the right of the strokes and create a new stroke. And you see currently nothing's available. So I need to click new down here. And then I want to click in the name material and I'm going to change this to test stroke. So for this example, I'm going to use this stroke when I go to create my drawing. So I want to have a stroke, so I'm going to leave that checked. I want the line type to be solid, but if I click on that, I also have a dots option and a squares option. I want the style also to be solid, but I can click texture. With this, I can add a texture to my stroke. So say I wanted to look more like a charcoal pencil or things like that. I can add a texture to that, but for this one, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to change texture back to solid. Now I'm not going to use these two selections for this stroke, but I do want to mention that hold out is where it removes the color from underneath the stroke by using the stroke as a mask. We won't need that for this one, and I haven't really used that much in the past. Then the next option is self-overlap. When selected, self-overlap allows the stroke to overlap. So what I mean by that is if I click on it, you can see, and I draw a stroke, you can see how it's darker there where the two come together. So I don't really use that either with my stroke, so I'm going to turn that off. Now I can turn on fill and create a stroke and a fill at the same time. So to provide an example, I'm going to click in the base color of stroke and change that to a green. And then I'll click in the base color of the solid and change that to blue. So you can see how that fills in with the blue and has a green outline. So I'm going to go back and turn that off because I don't want it for this one that I'm creating. And that's it for creating a stroke. If you need a stroke beyond what Grease Pencil gives you by default, this is how you create a new material, which in turn creates the stroke. Okay, I wanted to show you one more thing, and I've already deleted the previous Grease Pencil drawings that we did while we were doing the intro. I'm going to draw just something on here. And I want to show you how to delete your drawings in case you wanted to keep the same Grease Pencil file open, but you just wanted to delete it. So one option, if you don't want to delete it, you can go to the Properties menu under Stroke in the Grease Pencil object. You can turn that off if you just want to hide it. If you want to delete it, you could delete the whole layer like that. But if you want to keep the layer and just delete everything in it, you could choose the Erase tool and erase that. And I'm going to do a video on how strokes work and the different options for the Erase tool, but that is an option for you. Now, what I would do is I would hit Control Tab and I would choose Edit Mode. Now, if you've never used Edit Mode before, this is where in Object Mode, we can move the entire object, but in Edit Mode, we can actually affect the things that make up the objects. So strokes are made up of vertices, but other 3D objects are made up of vertices, edges, and polygons. So if I wanted to delete these but keep the layer, I would go to Edit Mode. Then if you left click and drag, I can select everything here, hit Delete, and then I can select points, and that's one way to delete everything without losing your layer if you want to keep your layer. You can also delete the keyframe down here in the animation keyframe area, but I feel like that's probably something we don't need to talk about at the moment. So those are the options you have for deleting strokes that you've made in Grease Pencil. To end this, I'm going to go ahead and draw a sketch for you just so you can see how sketching in Grease Pencil is like. So I'm starting with a clean slate in Grease Pencil. So I've got the lines layer selected, so that's the one I'm going to draw on. I'm going to scroll in a little bit, and I may go ahead and change the color of the viewport. So I'm going to go to the world properties, click in here, and just make that a little bit darker. And then we're still in edit mode, so I'm going to hit Control Tab and choose Drawing Mode. Now my cursor's a little too big, so I'm going to hit F and lower that some. And I'm still using the Erase tool, so let me switch over to Drawing. Okay, I'm going to lower that some too. So let's see, F, bring that down a little bit. Okay, it's a little too much. Too much, a little more. Okay, I think that's good. So I'm going to hit Control Z to delete all these. Okay, So I'm going to go back to the grease pencil properties, and you can see I'm on the lines layer. I'm using a pencil, and I'm using solid stroke. If we wanted to change that, I'll just do the drop down. I'll change solid stroke to a little bit grayer. And then I want to change opacity all the way to 100. Okay, I want to Control Z to get rid of those. So that's pretty much all you need to know to get started sketching in grease pencil. And I'm using a older Cintiq, so I am sketching on screen with that. And I'm not going to go super detailed with this. I just wanted to be kind of an example. This is going to be really rough. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it. I don't think I mentioned this in the video, but if you're using a stylus, you can click its button to change the radius and the strength. I can also change my layer here and my material. Okay, I'm going to choose the eraser tool. And if you click up here, there's a couple of different options. I'm going to use erase points, and that'll erase the actual points of the vertices. I do want to click F, and I want to reduce that a little bit. And that gives us a really clean erase because it's erasing the vertices. And I'm going to go back to the pen tool. Go back to erase. I am creating a shortcut guide for grease pencil, so I'll be posting that in the comments below at some point, and I'll put it on Gumroad for free so you can download it there. There are a lot of pop-up menus and things like that you can use for grease pencil. As an example, if I hit space bar and hold it, I can choose my draw tool, my fill tool, my erase tool. So that keeps you from having to go to the left to choose those. So if I choose draw, I can go back to it If I want to erase some things, I can choose that. Go back to draw. So that's a pretty quick way to work. I've got a stylus in one hand and a keyboard to my left, so it's easy for me to choose those. Go back to the eraser tool, draw tool. Go back to the erase tool, draw tool. Go back to the erase tool. Draw tool. Go on middle mouse button, scroll to zoom in a little bit. Go on middle mouse button, scroll out. Spacebar to erase, select eraser. Go back to draw. Scroll out a little bit. Okay, so I've drawn him too big. So I'm going to hit Control Tab and choose Object Mode. Then I'll hit S for scale. Scale that down a little bit. I'll hit G to grab it. Bring it up. Looks like up here, snapping is on. I don't know how that happens. Let me turn that off. Hit G again. Now I can move it. Then Control Tab to go back. Hit Draw Mode. Okay, I think that's a pretty good demonstration for now, so you can see what it's like to sketch in grease pencil. And then in future videos, I'll talk more about things like, inking, coloring, probably some animation. And I really want to go in depth on a lot of the tools, not only to be able to help people learn grease pencil, but to help me understand it a little better too. So I appreciate you watching. Hopefully you found this helpful. And, like and subscribe if you want to learn more about grease pencil. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.